Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2022. That brings us to a title which already exists in the Criterion Collection as a DVD at spine number 22. However, on this occasion, Criterion is seeing a re-emergence of this title to the collection under said spine number, but with a new Blu-ray edition, which is also purported to be based upon a new 4K digital restoration. And what film am I referring to? Well, it is this work, which is from 1955. The name of the director is David Lean. And the name of the film is Summertime. From 1955, and it is from the filmmaker David Lean, based upon the play by Arthur Lawrence, and it stars, among others, in its really beautiful and delicate cast, Rosanna Brazzi and Katharine Hepburn, who plays Jane, who could be said to be our main central character in this work, which is Summertime. Now, I use those words, beautiful and delicate, and I think those are very apropos regarding this. This is a tender film that is a romance film. It is a film about a very interesting character with certain character traits that might be described as quirky or idiosyncratic in some areas, but that are also very endearing and very charming as well. I'm speaking of the character of Jane Katharine Hepburn and her travels to this part of the world, Venice. Location shooting, which is one of the great strengths of this film, how the bulk of it is taking place actually in this place, this magical place of Venice, and really getting into the environment and the settings while we accompany this woman, this main character, the Katharine Hepburn character, who is traveling by train, or as we open the film, we see that she's entering this place, and she's on her own. She has her camera, she has her luggage, she knows where she's going, she has a destination in terms of her hotel. She tends to strike up conversations, maybe on purpose, maybe not. That might be a reflection of her own character and types of inner monologue parts of her character. Wanting to express herself but not quite knowing how, type of awkwardness when it comes to social situations that might lend itself to the lighthearted and comic and endearing. It also lends itself to her striking up conversations with random strangers that she meets. For example, a gentleman that she meets randomly on the train, or a young boy that she meets in the city, and other people, other guests in the hotel, and also some other characters, and we'll mention one in particular later, the Rosanna Brazzi character. But this aspect of her character comes through, and it shines through immediately upon the film's opening. And as I say, this could be a reflection, or it could be a representation, or it could be said to be a way in which this film does sit very comfortably in the world of the lighthearted and the type of endearing and heartwarming, in a manner of speaking, with the Venice locale against, in terms of a beautiful backdrop, and also furthered by the very charming presence of Katharine Hepburn. I mean, she had undeniable screen presence, and it shows here in this endearing way. However, what is so fascinating about this film, and those aspects are themselves fascinating, don't get me wrong, but what adds to the fascination, I would suggest, is this type of characterization could also find itself leaning towards or entering into the realm of the idiosyncratic, the quirky. Those are some words I used before. Also, they might suggest, or they do suggest, I would say, a feeling of awkwardness of the Jane character when she finds herself in certain social situations. She doesn't necessarily know how to satisfactorily talk in these maybe various situations with these people that we meet, for instance, some of the guests in the hotel, in order to, say, be able to join them in their company or have them join her in their company or something of that sort. She tends to find herself alone. She tends to find herself maybe even lonely. She tends to find herself, although she might want to seek to try to find the company of others, and indeed she does strike up, as I say, conversations, sometimes very detailed and very honest conversations with some of the other people that she meets. That's certainly the case. But there are other times when she is very noticeably maybe not sure of herself in terms of how to further along these, say, social conventions that might otherwise lead to connections with other people, or if they don't follow through, leave her alone again by herself. Is that what she wants? Maybe yes, maybe no. And so this becomes part of the, I think, interesting trajectory and exploration and, say, emotional a landscape that is being provided by this wonderfully heartfelt performance of the character of Jane, portrayed by Katharine Hepburn. So here we have this idea too of the introduction of the possibility of the theme of contemplations on loneliness. And whether that is a positive thing or a negative thing, or whether that is something that is yearned for or trying to be gained on purpose, or maybe it is accidental or something along the way. And I want to say too that the wonderful and complex way that we see Katharine Hepburn portray these scenes of seemingly quote-unquote social awkwardness seem to suggest the possibility of anything. It could be one thing or the other, or maybe both at the same time. I mean, one of the lovely things about films of this nature is that it captures the human condition and all of its complexities. And one of those complexities is we can feel contradictory things at the same time. And so my sense, too, is that there is a contradictory nature at work in the heart of the Katharine Hepburn character here, which I think adds to the fascination that we as viewers have, and also adds to wanting to go along with her and want to be with her and want to see her happy and succeed, whatever those words mean in the context of her particular story as we see it in the film Summertime. So, and so again, the performance is really very lovely and very delicate. Now, this is not the only component of the film, of course, because we also see Katharine Hepburn character Jane meeting other people, and one of the people that we know she meets is the character who is portrayed by Rossano Brazzi, who is from this area, who has certain details of his character revealed to us fairly early on, but then maybe there might be other details that slowly emerge as we get to know a little bit more about him as the film progresses. But there is a connection through a set of plot circumstances involving a shop, involving a goblet, a piece of a piece of sort of ornate goblet object that objet d'art, which may or may not be something that is maybe authentic to a period of time. It may or may not be. That is one of the plot points of the film, leading to their relationship together being established and then developing and growing. And the development and growth of the relationship between the Rossano Brazzi character and the Katharine Hepburn character is premised upon maybe mistaken identity, perhaps. It's also premised upon miscommunication. It's also premised upon maybe this type of slight comic hijinks of coincidental meetings. It's also premised upon a real, sincere, and earnest emotional connection between these two characters. And I really mean that. The weight of the intensity of the emotion that we get as their relationship progresses. And I mean emotion in whatever form that might take it, because as we know, the spectrum of human emotion is very wide. And indeed, we get a wide array of emotional activity between these two characters as the film progresses, again, based upon the plot. But then the film in a remarkable, extraordinary way, while telling its plot details and giving us a little bit more about who she is and who he is. It also gives room for this notion of, as I mentioned earlier, the contemplation of loneliness, also the contemplation of a type of existence. And here we have the contemplation of existence, I would say, as played out in the context of this relationship. What it means to be in this type of relationship, what it means to be in a place that is not one's own home. I'm talking about the perspective of Katharine Hepburn's character, although it's of course a different situation with Rosanna Brazzi's character. But the point that I want to make is, here we have something that is presented in a way that, of course, there are plot points that lead to this relationship happening. But there is also a way in which this film takes that relationship and uses it as a means for a type of philosophical contemplation, to have a really leisurely pace about it, takes its time to have us consider and ponder, leaves feelings lingering in the air for us to consider, as indeed the characters themselves consider. Katharine Hepburn's character really considers things, really feels things, really thinks things out. They might lead to possibilities and answers that may or may not affect the relationship that she has with Rosanna Brazzi's character. But the point I want to bring here is this film, Summertime, for all its beautiful location setting shots, for all its really charming turns of plot, for all its focus on the wonderful performances, including Katharine Hepburn's performance, what it also does so brilliantly is give room for this contemplation of human existence, of human condition, of romance, of a type of fleeting, impermanent thing, which might be called happiness, or what one might consider to be happiness or emotional satisfaction. What if one is confronted with the possibility of emotional satisfaction or happiness that one has never felt before in one's life? But the caveat is that this moment of happiness is fleeting, it's impermanent, it won't last forever. How does one digest this? How does one take this in? What does this do? How are we affected by this? And what do we do after the moment is over? Do we leave it lingering, or do we close it off forever? Or do we do something in between, a type of hybrid? Who knows? These and other questions, I think, do arise, and they are part of the spectrum of what might call the contemplation of human emotion. And I think Summertime, one of the great strengths of this film, is it provides us with the opportunity to share in this contemplation vis-a-vis the relationship between Katharine Hepburn and Rosanna Brazzi's character, and also vis-a-vis the characters themselves directly. And here we go back to the wonderful central performance by Katharine Hepburn. There is a longing. There's also a sense of maybe realization that she may or may not have made all the quote-unquote right choices in terms of what her heart needed versus what her head needed at the time, but also there is a sense of regret, but also dealing with this regret in a way that is accepting of the past, accepting of the present, and also accepting of the future. In other words, a full sense of the contemplative mode that is on display in this film, while also giving us this wonderful treat of the eyes, the ears, the senses overall of the Venice locale, while also giving us the feeling of the lighthearted and the emotionally, say, touching and rewarding, as well as giving us a feeling of satisfaction on the one hand, but also a sense of yearning and wanting more on the other, and what that ultimately means for the characters and what that ultimately means for us in the long run. This is the work from 1955, the work by David Lean, which is Summertime. The Criterion Collection has released this film, or should I say re-released this film, into its physical media catalog, again at spine number 22. This is, of course, to remind us that this film did exist in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog at this time as an early DVD release. Here's an example of such early DVD release right here. And also, for Criterion Collection Laserdisc enthusiasts, you will know that this also existed as a Criterion Laserdisc right here, which is at spine number, Laserdisc spine number 116. So it has a rich and deep history in terms of physical media releases with the Criterion Collection. However, another chapter of that history can be said to be made with regard to this new Blu-ray release, which is for this year, 2022. It is a new 4K digital restoration, at least that's how it's described. To be specific, the insert, which I've taken the liberty of removing here in advance. It's a great insert, by the way. I'm not a fan of fold-outs, but this is really cool, and I'll share some of the reasons why a little bit later in this video. But on one of the pages, it does say about the transfer, and it says, "Summertime is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.37 to 1. This new digital transfer was created in 4K resolution from the 35mm original camera negative. In some instances, duplicate shots had been inserted into the negative, etc. The monaural soundtrack was remastered from a 35mm original optical soundtrack negative." And I must say, it might seem like a cliche, but I use the cliche because I think it best describes how I feel, which is, it's like watching the film for the first time for me. I know of this film, or I knew of this film through the Criterion Collection releases of the DVD and then the Laserdisc. And those very respectable releases, of course, very respectable indeed, but they do have, well, how should I put it? This new 4K restoration is so much of a, it's so lively in its colors, and it seems to be just, it feels like a breath of fresh air has been put into the proceedings, and it feels and looks and sounds sparkling. It's dazzling, and it's absorbing, and I feel so welcomed in the manner of speaking. There are some key points that color is used. Color is, of course, used in terms of how the environment and decoration, decor and backdrop of the city and the landscape and the canals, how this is presented. And this is very important in terms of the key, providing one of the key ingredients of the film, which is the location. And the city as a character itself. And so this is, I think, presented with such, I think, pristine detail. And I'm so thrilled by this, because some of these backdrop scenes really come alive in a manner of speaking that I've never quite experienced in this way, I must admit. And also colors are very key. And there are some colors that are used, red as an example, and red is used in very bright daylight scenes. It's also used in dimly lit, darkened scenes in evening or nighttime hours as well. And in either case, we have a sense of the crystal structure and the way in which it attracts, and it also has a magnetic, almost dangerous charm about it, this bringing up as an example. And it's like ruby red vibrance. It's really quite astonishing. And the way the film sounds to me as well, it has this, I don't know, it looks and feels and sounds great. And it was almost like a new lease on life in a manner of speaking. As I say, not that I have anything against these wonderful items from the Criterion Collection catalog, the DVD and the Laserdisc. I'm a big fan of the DVD, I'm a big fan of the Laserdisc, and I'm a big fan of those formats. However, I must applaud, really take my hat off here for this wonderful, wonderful release. One of the reasons of which being the presentation and the transfer that is being relied upon. It is like watching the film anew, and a wonderful job. It makes me feel so excited once again for watching this film. And so this is a great choice, a really great choice indeed. And now another way in which this Blu-ray release is also quite astonishing is that, again, compared with past releases from Criterion, where we had, for example, the DVD had the trailer. It was an example of an early DVD, we must remind ourselves, of course. And so the idea of supplemental materials, both from a marketing standpoint and also from a technical standpoint, might seem to be limited, especially when compared to the options and opportunities that today, in today's standard release opportunities provide to us, the consumers. But we must remember then, this is an early DVD from the early days of the Criterion Collection physical media DVD catalog. But with that being said, we have some new supplements that will guide us in terms of this packaging. So what are some of the things that are included? Well, first up is a 1963 interview with David Lean himself. This is described as being from April 1963, Canadian Broadcast Corporation close-up, 22 minutes approximately. And here we have a one-on-one discussion with David Lean himself. And this is really quite valuable because we are reminded, of course, this is a David Lean work. And in many ways, this is a very key David Lean work. It will be described by Melanie Williams in the other supplement here and elsewhere about how this has often been described as David Lean's most maybe favorite work of his, in terms of the very impressive output that he has in his filmography, of course. This has been described as one of, if not his favorite. And so that is a very intriguing place upon which this film is positioned in the context, as I say, of his really wonderful and vast filmography. Well, in keeping with that, or in connection to that, we have a one-on-one interview with him where he provides some details about his background. He describes his Quaker family roots, and how with this background he was also introduced to movies, and he talks about being introduced to the world of cinema, and then getting into the industry. There were plans for his profession or vocation. The plans of his family were actually quite different than what ended up happening in terms of his career path and his life path, but in terms of accountant training and studies. But he wanted to get into the arts, and he ended up becoming or being involved in the cinema industry through editing and cutting in terms of movie tone news, etc., and then also his work with sync sound, etc., Alexander Korda, etc. And then this leads into a discussion in this interview about the milestone landmark works in his career. For example, Lawrence of Arabia, and there's a brief discussion about that work in terms of some of the scenes that were shot, some of the famous iconic scenes that were shot, some of the character resolution choices that were made in the context of the discussion of that film, etc., and the like. And also this leads to a discussion, brief, albeit very, very nice and valuable, in terms of his other works, working with stars, in terms of other works like Oliver Twist. In the context of Summertime, we do get discussion about working with people like Katharine Hepburn and his respect and working relationships with very seasoned and professional actors and performers like Hepburn. So this is, I think, a great introduction into the, say, life and career of David Lean, from David Lean himself. So if you are new to the world of David Lean, or if you are curious as to what kind of personality, what kind of director, what kind of person he may have been, or he is, or was, then this is a great place to go. So it's not an overall encompassing point-by-point history of his entire life and biography and filmography, but it is maybe a nice jumping off point. It is also a great way to get a sense of who he was, his demeanor, his manner of speaking, and the like. And so it's always a very nice and valuable thing to get a sense of who the filmmakers were who made the film that one is watching. And one of the ways is to watch these interviews, such as the one here with David Lean from '63. So this is the first supplement here, the 22-minute interview from 1963, excuse me, with David Lean himself. But that's not all, because the next supplement is we have a 2022 discussion with Melanie Williams, who's the author of David Lean. So she is an expert, film expert, an expert into the life and works of David Lean himself. So this one-on-one discussion with Melanie Williams is about 21 minutes. This is really lovely. It's given the title of The Most Beautiful Things in Life, Melanie Williams on Summertime. This is really lovely. This conversation with Melanie Williams is fantastic. really fantastic for a number of reasons. So first off, she does build upon the idea of giving us some details and background into the career, the life and times and career of David Lean leading up to Summertime. And so there is this notion or this concept or this way in which, say, David Lean's works tend to be regarded or viewed maybe in contemporary times and maybe even now. Or maybe let's talk about contemporary times first. This idea of there was a respect that was given towards him and his art and his works, but there was also what she describes as a cold craftsperson aspect or a critical trepidation with regard to maybe what might have been perceived as an emotionally reserved or cold aspect to an otherwise grand scale spectacle film. The like, which of course earned a lot of critical attention, awards attention, etc. So films like Lawrence of Arabia, etc. So there is a type of craft that is on display that is undeniable, but maybe to some who were regarding this at the time, that was in lieu of, or it was taking away from the emotional, say, investment of films by David Lean. So there was this a respect versus a critical trepidation. These are the words of Melanie Williams. And that is a really interesting dynamic, because what she then posits or argues is that this type of say, critical assessment tends to change over time, or tended to change over time. So you have people from, say, later generations of filmmakers, such as Steven Spielberg, etc., really giving great praise and respect and awe, and giving great emotional weight to the works of David Lean. So that leads to, I think, an understanding, as Melanie Williams reminds us, that David Lean's career is made up of what might be argued to be not just one type of film, not just the epic spectacle film, but it's also made up, again, based on or depending on various periods of his career. And it has interesting chapters, David Lean's career does, according to Melanie Williams, as well described by her. It also has moments of real intense emotional filmmaking that is going at the core of something that is very heartfelt, very tragic, very emotionally powerful. I mean, some of the works that David Lean has directed are incredibly powerful indeed. Now, that brings us to Summertime and Melanie Williams' discussion here on Summertime. She reminds us that it's been described as his favorite film, and she then describes how the film has maybe a type of shift with the concept of maybe looking at it maybe in a bookend type of analysis or comparative analysis with another very important work by David Lean, which is Brief Encounter. And here we have an interesting way in which she is describing how important and how significant this work Summertime is when comparing and contrasting to a previous work like Brief Encounter. They have similar plot lines. There is a sense of a chance encounter, a blossoming, a feeling of romance and love and emotional intensity does develop. There might be external circumstances which may or may not allow them to find some kind of emotional satisfaction in certain current circumstances which the films respectively find these characters in, etc., etc. And so these parallels, I think, can be drawn, and she draws them very, very well. But she also turns her attention to the real, intensely individualized and emotionally profound aspects of why Summertime is Summertime, and for her, it reveals a sensibility about David Lean's work that is also very reflective of David Lean's work itself. In other words, this is, I think, Melanie Williams' way of trying to counter that initial argument that she presented earlier, which is that his works are cold. On the contrary, as Melanie Williams, I think, describes so brilliantly here, his works are not cold. If you see a film like Summertime, you realize that it's filled with a lot of feeling and thought and passion indeed, expressed in these wonderfully individualized ways. And here, that leads into her discussion of the background of the work, talking about the Arthur Lawrence play, The Time of the Cuckoo, and how there were certain similarities, but also certain differences as well. And talking, for instance, one of those ways in which there might have been some adaptation is the character of the Renato character, who was portrayed, of course, Rossano Brazzi in the film. And there might have been a darker turn of the play that was made a little bit more, shall we say, optimistic or life-affirming in a manner of speaking, how his character is portrayed, or certain details of how his character is portrayed, especially when you get to the latter half of the film's plot and its progression. And also talking about love stories, the telling of love stories, the importance of the goblet, that's mentioned here as well. And talking too about the characterization of the Katharine Hepburn character, the embarrassment of being alone, and how this feeling of embarrassment, social awkwardness, is captured so with such a sense of heartfelt sympathy in the hands of Katharine Hepburn. And we really feel for her, and we feel with her as well. And she has the camera, and how the camera is almost like her protection in a way, or her way to break free from what otherwise might be a situation of social awkwardness for her. But that becomes a very important thing. But that too becomes its own sense of awkward. There's also a very famous scene involving trying to take a picture and falling into the canal, and so that is also remarked upon here as well, with loving detail by Melanie Williams, etc. So this is a really, in many ways, this is one of the highlights of this release. I so wish that, for instance, Melanie Williams could have provided, that would have been so great as well, if she could have provided as well a full feature-length commentary to accompany this. There is no commentary track on this, and that's a shame. It would have been nice to have a commentary track, a new, fresh one. And could you imagine if Melanie Williams had presented a commentary track to this? Wow, what a treat that would have been. However, we don't get that commentary track, but what we do get is this great conversation. So, strongly recommended. And the questions and possibilities that she poses here, as well as giving us the historical detail and background to the career of David Lean, and how this is very significant in the context of his filmography. These points and more are reason enough to watch this great conversation with Melanie Williams. Again, The Most Beautiful Things in Life, Melanie Williams, on Summertime. So please check it out if you can. It's approximately 21 minutes. And that's not all, because then we have an audio excerpt collection. And this is with Jack Hildyard, the cinematographer. And here this is described as being from January 1988, a British entertainment history project. It's totaling approximately 13 minutes, and there are subtitles there as well. So here we have the wonderful comments from the cinematographer about getting into the business of filmmaking, and indeed photography in filmmaking. There was maybe a general interest in camera and photography, but there's also this type of what one might call the random qualities of life that led him to becoming the great cinematographer that he became. Getting into, there's a great anecdote about how he there was getting in as an extra on a film, etc. So and BIP, BND, and the use of the camera itself. There's talking about the Technicolor process, 3-strip process, and very other technical details, but also talking about black and white photography. And there's a great way in which he describes black and white photography, talking about the separations, black and white, shooting black or white, but shooting it as though it were lit in color. I found that to be, wow. Again, I'm not an artist. I am not in any way involved in the craft of cinema, photography, and editing. So I have much to learn about how the artistic process is considered by great artists. And so this idea, black and white, lit in color, that's quite profound. And then he talks too about the war and the wartime effort, and how that how that affected his career. And then there's a return, or there is attention made, a brief just attention made toward the end here, towards David Lean and Summertime and the work on Summertime. So all in all, this is, again, another great aspect because as hinted at, or as might have been suggested in talking about how this is presented, the look of this film is a key aspect. And one of the key aspects, too, is how this film shot the location and scenery, while also taking great care to focus on the detail of the characters. And so we have interior shots, etc., and the like, but also exterior shots as well, because a lot happens in terms of the exterior. It's about the exterior and it's about the backdrop, but it's not just about the backdrop. It's about everything that is involved in that particular moment in Venice at the time. So this is a great, again, set of sort of audio excerpted interview. Jack Hildyard. So please check this out if you can. Totaling, again, approximately 13 minutes. And then the supplements are rounded out with the inclusion of a trailer. And so that is the supplements package for the Criterion release of Summertime. On paper, it might seem like, in terms of quantity, it might seem a little bit slight, especially when compared to, say, other Criterion releases. Again, on paper, and just looking at it from a pure quantity value proposition, yes, it might seem slight, but I would assert that you are getting a lot. And in particular, for example, I really enjoyed the Melanie Williams discussion. It made me want to hear a full commentary track. We didn't get a commentary track, but we do get that plus others here. So it is definitely worth it in terms of the supplements. I must say, too, that this presentation, or this artwork, is really, really splendid. I'm so impressed with this. The art is credited to art director Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, illustration Lauren Tamaki, design Eric Skillman. I am very, very impressed with it. I love this look and the artwork here. Look at this. This is really splendid, and the font as well, to sort of suggest that use of the font, etc., in the film, and also that just that spirit in that. And I'm opening the case here, and you can see that spirit of the drawing and the intensity reflected so nicely here. And also we have that motif, or motifs, extended here with the insert as well. It is a fold-out insert, and I'm not a fan of the fold-out. I much rather have the stapled booklet, but we get this this carryover of the drawings, the illustrations. There is the use of color as well. And so I must say, too, that this is a reminder of how rich and how lovely color is applied. And so we have the emphasis here on the primary colors as an example. So well done for reminding us of this through the artwork. And two, we have the inclusion of another wonderful essay. This is by Stephanie Zacharek. This is called Souvenirs. And once again, I recommend, after you've seen the film, not before, but after you've seen the film, that is the opportune time to read this essay, and indeed any other essay that might be found with any Criterion release of your choosing. Watch the film first, and after you watch the film, you can get into those essays, including the Zacharek essay here, which is really, really great. It's great for a number of reasons. I must say that it does also, it focuses in on Katharine Hepburn's character. As one example why this is great is it focuses on the Katharine Hepburn character and the needs and the sort of emotional landscape and the struggles that are suggested with her particular journey, and that might have led up to this trip that we find her in as the film starts. But it also focuses on the needs and concerns and desires and wants and maybe failings of the character that is on the other side of the coin, the Rossana Brazzi character. And so it does frame it in some circles or in some modes of the conversation from this viewpoint of the basis of the characterization of Katharine Hepburn. From feminist reading, but there are also other readings that are being presented here, and also the idea of focusing in on the examination of human existence and loneliness and the contemplation of such, and also taking that using the example of Roxana Brazzi as a character, as an example. And that is very profound. And that is another reason why this is a great essay. It's far-reaching, it's wide in scope, it's detailed, it's precise, it's brilliant. So check out this essay if you can, the Stephanie Zacharek essay, which is called Souvenirs. And I must say, too, that lately I've noticed that not for every single release, but for many of the releases lately, for these fold-outs, they're using, Criterion is using a type of paper that has this nice thick quality to it. I know it's a minor point. It's not, it shouldn't be the single reason to or to not buy this work, I understand, or this release, I understand. But there's this, I don't know, it just feels of a type of quality of paper that makes for, I guess, an overall pleasant experience in the overall scheme of the physical media experience, I suppose. So that's just one detail. Minor it may seem, but still noticeable all the same. So that, my friends, is just my take on the Criterion release of Summertime from this year. It's really great. So if you want to visit or revisit this work by David Lean, here's your chance. This is Summertime. Okay, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very, very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.